Imagine yourself under a starry sky, around the warm glow of a sacred fire, where speakers gather to share their wisdom and insights. Creating a sacred space where all are welcome to warm their hands, here are your hosts, Sarenth Odinson, Snow, Cabra, and Emily Streaking Fate. Discuss spirituality, mythology, animism, and culture around a virtual sacred fire. Won't you join us around Grandfather Fire?
I don't know. Beyond the light of my mind lies the infinite, and should my knowing become a bonfire to rival the sun, there will still be infinite darkness beyond. I don't know when I will die. It's in the unknown, waiting. One day my fire will meet that knowledge, and the flame will extinguish. I will join the unknown, the infinite, the dark. Also in the purple night is the name of the friend I have not yet met, the love song I have not yet sung, and the sunrise I have not yet seen. When I face my small battle and the path to victory is uncertain, I will pray to the lights. I will pray to the sun, moon, and stars. I will pray to the lantern and the candle, the light bulb and the flashlight, the hearth fire of my grandmothers, and that great fire of wisdom passed down from magician to magician. Also on that day, as I tremble in my courage, I will pray to you. In the unknown lies possibility and salvation. I will meet you with faith. I will meet you with imagination. I will meet you, source of myself who was once unknown, with hope. Velvet night, continuous one of heaven, I quiver before you in fear and want. Kiss me where the light is soft and gentle, in the arms of our name for you. Night, Nyx, Nuit, Star Goddess. You who are pure potential, you who are not yet made, not known, not named, hear now my prayer, my small offering of light. I don't know, and I'm very excited to find out.
Welcome to another episode of Around Grandfather Fire. This is episode 125 with my good friends and co-hosts, Cabra and Snow.
It's not, it's 127.
Whoops. 127. Shall I try that again?
I mean, you can try that again, or we can say that we're time traveling.
There you go. All right, I will do that one more time. I haven't goofed that hard in a long time. Welcome to another episode of Around Grandfather Fire. This is episode 127 with my good friends and co-hosts, Cabra and Snow. How are you all feeling tonight?
I'm good, thanks. I've just been brushing up on my Edic knowledge of Valkyrie references and such for tonight's special guest in a bit. But no, I mean, just enjoying the Easter break here. How's everyone else doing?
I feel rubbery. I had a staycation this week, and so I let myself do a couple pieces of ritual work that I normally can't do because I have to do math the next day. And so I am still feeling the effects, the sort of, I don't know if other people have this, but sometimes for really deep ritual work, for a few days afterwards, I just feel very wordless. Not just about the ritual itself, but also about like everything. Hopefully I will have my words and my math brain back by Monday when I have to go to my job. But I'm very much enjoying not necessarily having to do more than have a nice conversation with some old friends and a new acquaintance today. Also, if you hear meowing in the background, I fed him. I don't know what he wants. Sarenth, how are you doing?
I am tired. I'm pretty tired. I'm working about 3 to 4 overtime a week, and I'm trying to get this damn book finished. The 3 to 4 overtime a week is not really by choice. It's either I choose pre-plans where I get to choose what place I want to work and how and when, or I get chosen for me and it's mandatory overtime. And these are 16-hour shifts. So I operate much better going from PM to midnights, which is my usual, as opposed to midnights to day shift, which is when I get mandated. That takes a lot out of me. So it's easier on everybody if I just pre-plan for those 3 days. Aside from that, I'm doing pretty good. I am missing my partner and can't wait for them to come back. A lot of things are happening kind of all at once. It really does feel like finally the preparation for my son graduating this year is underway, and that is just buck wild to me. There are times where I catch
Congratulations to him.
Oh yeah, I'm so proud of him. He's done so much work to get here. It's wild when you sit back and think about it, and the feeling of I think I just brought this kid home. What the hell is he doing growing up? Uh, it's doing a number on me, and so yeah, that's one of the big things that's going on right now. He's actually at a photo shoot for his senior pictures, and they took the dog with them. So like the absence of noise and the scrabbling of feet above my head is partly because everybody went to this photo shoot, but I. So like it's becoming real. This year has been kind of odd because we came out of COVID and had to switch him off of the we haven't come out of COVID, but you know what I mean. We come out of a lot of the precautions, and so we had to switch him off of a online only environment into an in-school environment again, and he has flourished. He flourished in the previous one, but this year has been really great to see him really take off and explore things and do things.
That's really cool because I know lots of people struggled with coming out of lockdown and trying to sort of reintegrate and get going again. So it's really nice to hear that you're saying he's sort of flourished with it.
Yeah, I mean, if they'd kept the previous program that they had, it would have been one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, they decided to switch providers for some stupid reason. So they switched the provider for the online portion. They went from Google to Pearson, and it was horrid. So we pulled him out of the online courses. He went back to physical courses, which was nice because he actually got to see friends before the end of this year.
Right.
So like a lot of the stuff that he was just challenged by with the way that they decided to do the formatting for the online portion. It was too much. So it's just been great to see him really take a lot of really positive steps forward into his future. So that's been a lot of what's on my plate.
All during Aries eclipse season.
Oh my God. Yeah, that too.
Do we want to do a quick roundup of the astrology of today?
Do you want to go for it?
Okay. Eclipse season happens twice a year. It is about 2 weeks long. This time we are going from a full moon to a new moon. The season started on the March 25th with the lunar eclipse and is ending tomorrow with a solar eclipse. Everybody is losing their bananas about it in the English-speaking world because the eclipse will be viewable from a large portion of the US. And so, of course, the American media is losing their minds about it, and people are traveling to go look at the eclipse. We are also having a Mercury retrograde, and I believe Pluto is squaring the retrograde that Mercury's going through at some points. There's some interaction between the Mercury retrograde and where Pluto is sitting right now. And Pluto is also in a particular point this year because it's the official final crossover fully from Capricorn Pluto to Aquarius Pluto. So it's the beginning of another 20-year span of time from a political astrology standpoint. And we're going to unfortunately probably see rumbles about that over the next 2 weeks as Mercury figures itself out. in the branch of astrology that I practice, eclipses are seen as bad luck. And if you don't have an eclipse in your natal chart, or you don't have a lot of node placements, it's a time to clean your house and stay home. And especially with Mercury in retrograde, it's even more so a time to clean your house and stay home. Snow, what do you make of it over in Hellenic astrology land?
Well, I was going to say, I know over here that the date for it's the 8th, so that's the day after tomorrow, over here in GMT time. But no, I just keep thinking it's funny seeing all these people sort of going crazy and losing their shit over it, and it just makes you think of how for, the ancient Mesopotamians and stuff, an eclipse was like a world-ending event, and they were like, oh, the king's gonna die, the country's gonna collapse, and then you look at the news and see everyone flocking to see this eclipse, and it's like, it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that with the rise of democracy and republics, or at least with elections, we're used to the executive leader of the country getting replaced every so often. And so if you're just like, oh, we're going to get a new president, people are going to be like, yeah, it's an election year. Because the North African sages say that it is a time of revolt, and it is a time of like you said, kings being removed from their thrones quite suddenly. So it could be just part of the evolution of the zeitgeist, man.
I mean, we have a general election coming up at some point between now and sometime next year,
Mm-hmm.
which is as much as anyone knows.
As a blatant excuse to not have to talk about American politics, does someone want to introduce our guest for the episode?
Please go ahead, Snow.
So our guest for today is Sif. Sif is a Norse heathen and an expert on the Valkyries. She's a committee member for Ásatru UK and the Pagan Federation, for whom she's also the national LGBTQIA+ manager, and she's one of the copy editors for the Pagan Federation's magazine Pagan Dawn. As of late, Sif is the co-author and the artist of the newly published The Wyrd Less Woven, an Alternative Heathen Prayer Book. So welcome to the show, Sif. It's really cool to have you here.
Thank you. That sounds way more impressive when you put it like that.
I mean, you do a lot.
Yeah. Just yeah, to a all-time consuming degree. I really should stop. Help me.
It just keeps piling up.
I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Do you need some help? Yeah, that's me. I'll do it.
You must learn the ancient word of power of abjuration. No.
I really should.
I honestly think you came to the wrong crowd when you were like, help me say no.
Yeah.
I just keep signing up for shit. This is where other people tell me no.
Yeah.
Like, this is a bad idea, sir. Maybe you shouldn't do another project.
It's from like the UK perspective, everything is so closely knit to the point where if you know one person and you ally yourself with them, they'll be like, oh, I know one person, she'll be great. And then they're just gonna like scoop you in, and it just spirals and snowballs from there.
Yeah. I understand.
That's how you end up being on the committees for two different organizations here.
And what's quite funny is it's like I also work with a couple of charities where this very same people also keep popping their heads up. So it's just a crazy network web of people who do just kind of gravitate towards just volunteering for various organizations.
So I guess to sort of start at the start then, how would you sort of run us through how you came to heathenry to begin with?
Oh, I will say that I was christened. I was raised in a Church of England household, not particularly practicing, just quite private, but it was there, it was present. My nan was particularly church going, and didn't take too kindly about me becoming an atheist around about the age of 5, 6. And I was very nihilistic atheist. I was very much a nothing exists. We are alone, solitary, on a little piece of rock in the middle of nowhere. And then I thought I was going to stay for a while, but then around my early 20s, I started realizing I was a little bit adrift, unanchored, you might say, and realizing that I had a bit of a hole in me that I felt like I needed to find a wholeness to regain that. I started looking into kind of animistic practices. From a very early age, I was really into Greek mythology, and I'm surprised I didn't go down that road. But I ended up, I don't know how, I guess just stumbling upon heathenry in, I wonder if anyone, still worships the Nordic gods. Oh, they do, cool. And then just gradually just kind of like being pulled into their gravitational pull, and really just finding a sense of peace and an anchor and community as well that I felt like I had been missing but didn't know what I was missing. And really from there it just became a case of being pulled along and then also just helping people find that same joy that I had upon realizing that, okay, this is right for me, this feels good, I feel complete now, and really just going from there.
So, in your experiences, when you finally decided to come around to this pathway, were you helped or hindered by what was out there at the time? What resources did you actually glom onto early in your journey? And were there things that you wish you had then that you have now? Or are there things that you're seeing now that you're like, wow, you guys could really use some of this GeoCities with the spinning logos?
Yeah. I mean, despite I'm 30 now, so I was identifying as a heathen around about 25, which was about 5 years ago. So at the exact moment that I was starting to poke my head round into, I really want to find a community, COVID hit.
Oh, that sucks.
And it was like, hi, I'm here for in person. Oh, everyone's retreating into the shadows. And that was, so a lot of my early experiences in terms of wanting to have a community with other people was online. And luckily, or some of the communities I now currently work with, they adapted. So the Pagan Federation was really one that I kind of clung on to. It had a national presence. Obviously, it wasn't specifically heathen, but they were still doing like online rituals, and they made that switch a lot faster than many others did. So yeah, I kind of just like hung on to them for dear life because like all the other local kindreds are just sort of like just dissipated, and that I really went from there. And of course, they have various networks, and they could point me in the right direction. And then eventually, it became I found Ásatru UK, and basically just the rest is history. I mean, I think it's only really in the last year that you've started to get the momentum build again for physical events, and like kindreds meeting up. It's been a bit slow gaining that momentum, but it's pretty much where it was before the pandemic now. But yeah, that kind of, it took me a little bit off kilter, because there was the advice wasn't there. It was a case of, well, we had these groups, we're on a little bit of a pause right now, but eventually we'll come back. So that was basically where I started. A bit rough.
I can definitely resonate with COVID lockdown hitting, and the groups that I was part of that did online ritual during lockdown and that encouraged people to do solo devotions during lockdown, they came out of COVID swinging. And the ones that were like, we're going to call it till lockdown is over and we know how COVID looks like in the future, they had a hard time getting started back up. Because what had happened is people had all this time from my perspective, people had all this time, it needed somewhere to go and something to do. And so when the groups came back after COVID, it's like, where were you for the last 2 years? Where were you when I needed you? I'm now leaning on this other resource that was accessible to me during lockdown, and I'm not going to put it back down to pick someone up who's also going to drop me the next time that something happens to get hard, right? I don't know how that last bit was your experience.
No, yeah, I would say that was very much. If I didn't experience it personally, I knew others that definitely did. Luckily, with both the Pagan Federation and Ásatru UK, they had that momentum going, so it wasn't so much of a like pick up from scratch. But yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about people just struggling to scramble together what was left and to reform it, because people had gone elsewhere essentially for, that fulfillment.
I think it's really interesting as well seeing how people sort of compare and contrast the online and the offline here. Because you get a lot of people who only do stuff offline in person who get very dismissive about online rituals, virtual meetings, things like that. And you also get the other way where people who are very much accustomed to the online stuff are almost afraid of the offline in-person stuff because they feel there's sort of risk there, running into the wrong kinds of crowds or people where it's easier to pull out of online spaces. I was wondering what your thoughts were and sort of how in your experiences, how you contrast the online and the offline there.
I would say that specifically the two organizations I work with, they have a nice balance. Saying that balance is fragile. We try to cater to all experiences and all preferences. Obviously, the online rituals are better because you don't have to travel. It's easily accessible. You don't have all of those barriers for entry. Obviously, the in-person events are really where, at least with AUK, that's their bread and butter. That's where they thrive, and it really is like retroactively adopting those online measures to kind of just fill in some gaps. But yeah, there is definitely a kind of, you need to reconcile somewhere. There needs to be a middle ground that both camps are happy with, and that's a struggle, and I think it will be a struggle. Obviously, you'll always have those people who just don't want to attend in-person events, which is obviously incredibly valid, and vice versa. They don't feel like the online aspects are really catering to whatever they need. But yeah, I think the crucial thing is going to be finding the nice middle grounds that isn't one thing or another entirely, but something that's open to the most people.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I've seen that's been very nice. My experience with on vacation here in Michigan and with the Troth, uh, especially since last year, offering a dual application basically. So if you want to show up digitally, you can show up. If you want to show up physically, you can show up. I mean, this year's Summer Troth Moots in California, that's a lot for a lot of people. And so being able to actually show up digitally without having to be a member of the Troth and just show up with a Zoom, you're paying, I think, 25 or $50 and you have full access, which is great. I mean, especially because, you're across the pond. That would be a hell of a hike.
Yeah. It's on my list of things to do. Both visit California in person and do Zoom for the Troth. But yeah, it's freeing. It's again, one of the big things we're focusing on at the moment is inclusivity and accessibility. So those are really the foundational pillars of building community and building a community in the post-COVID world and all of that. But yeah, definitely something that I've always had people saying we want this rather than we don't want it. So it's always more options in terms of how we can do this, this, and this to try and make it accessible for you. And obviously the Zoom is a great tool for that, especially like with Discord as well. Just basically saying like, here are all your options. Just choose which one is preferable for you. But yeah, I'm all for the online elements being incorporated into in-person events, and that's something we're really looking at, specifically with streaming, and just trying to find exploring those sorts of avenues is next.
So we've mentioned them a couple of times, but I was just wondering for people who aren't familiar, if you could maybe sort of give a brief rundown as to both what Ásatru UK and the Pagan Federation are.
Yeah, sure. They're both CICs. Both the Pagan Federation is quite old. It was formed in the 1970s. It started off as a solely Wiccan kind of organization. They had their own magazine, and it's really just been a kind of a constant over the UK paganism for the last 50 years. So quite old now. And Ásatru UK was formed in 2013, might be 2014, as a Facebook group, and really has just spun out from there. It's mostly kind of in-person events. There is a Facebook group, but it's they have one big annual gathering a year called the Great Heathen Gathering, and little ones dotted throughout the year, and that's really, I think it's accurate to say that they're the largest inclusive heathen organization in the UK. And that's something that obviously I'm very proud of being a part of that. And they're just going up and up, and yeah, I'm just thrilled to be a part of that organization, as well as the Pagan Federation, of course.
For us uneducated Americans, what's a CIC?
It's a community interest company.
Okay.
So it's like a charity, but like charity light.
Okay.
Okay, so probably like a nonprofit for us then, huh?
Yeah. Everything that essentially the mode of operation is anything we're given in terms of financial support goes right back into supporting the community. So,
Yep, our nonprofits operate the same way.
awesome.
Because one thing that I've seen on the Pagan Federation website that I think is really cool is they talk about doing prison work and the advocacy programs and things, which I know sort of in the US groups like the Troth are really into and things like that. I was wondering if you were, do you know much about how that's going, how that operates? Are you involved with that side of it, or?
I'm not personally involved in it, but being within the committee, I hear a lot. There's stuff like just into the chaplaincy in terms of like creating calendars for prisoners and books that were distributed among the prison service, and yeah, it's kind of, they operate along several various kind of areas within the UK government and in terms of the public, the general public as well, including things like counterterrorism. They're heavily involved with that. They're in the government in terms of advising on pagan representation. They have a pagan defense network, which is all about like veterans, and also in terms of one of their most recent projects was trying to get a pagan representative at the cenotaph. And just there's a lot of fingers in pies, essentially. There's also like hospital work, pastoral care, so on and so forth. It's quite scarily expansive, and I'm just in my little corner. Just my official role on the committee is the council's representative for the committee. So basically, I feed the council, which is I think there's so many people in the council, but it's all the like district representatives, all the community support team, the Pagan Dawn editors, and just kind of like make sure that communication line is solid between the council and the committee. So, but yeah, it's honestly just a little bit baffling at times being in those meetings and just hearing about just how much stuff is going on. And I just go, hey, this stuff's happening. That's my job. But yeah, it's new things happening all the time. Advocacy, like pagan legal things, like are way above my head. But yeah, it's just to make sure that pagans have a representation along most pipelines and a seat at the table, basically. But yeah, it's yeah, I mean, it's also heading in a really good direction as well for reasons I cannot explain, because I don't think it's been announced officially yet.
So real quick, for those who are listening, the cenotaph is a war memorial in London.
Yeah.
And it means empty tomb, and it's positioned on Whitehall. So it's a place where you can come and have people remembered. So it's Yeah, just wanted to point that out just for folks.
Sorry.
I had to take a second. I'm like, I know that's a thing, but I couldn't remember what it was.
It's the big World War One memorial. They have the big to do there every Remembrance Day,
Yeah.
Okay.
11th.
Yeah.
So that's a big gathering where the Prime Minister will go, a royal representative will go, all things like that. They'll televise it. They'll do the minute silence there and everything.
Mhm.
I'm a little curious about the differences in differences in barriers between the UK and the US.
Mhm.
I know in the US we run into issues where the more your religion looks like Christianity, the easier it is to deal with institutions. So they often expect us to have clergy who can afford a master's of divinity, which is a very expensive degree of study. We don't have congregations large or wealthy enough to support someone to go and do that kind of study and then have those student loans. They often ask, like, what's your holy book? Some paganisms do not have holy books, very pointedly, and they're just like, well, what are your rules? How do you know that you're doing ethics properly? And then some people are like, we don't mix spirituality and ethics. Ethics is a personal problem. And so, like, the farther away from Christianity your religion becomes, the harder it is to integrate with like prison systems, interfaith councils, college-aged clubs on campus, right? High school, after school clubs, prison ministry, hospital ministry. But is the UK having a similar issue, or is like Christian hegemony look different over there? Is there less Christian hegemony over there?
I think that's a very good question. I would say that one of the big issues we're facing at the moment is coming across these institutions that don't understand paganism. They're expecting, as you've covered, a one size fits all. And that has been the case for the last few decades. What we are seeing now, though, is it's less about formality and just more about who you know. It's networking. It's we're basically pagans are sitting at these government tables and basically gently nudging them in the right direction. It's like Game of Thrones over here. It's it's like yeah, it's interesting because obviously you don't want to come across as they don't like it if you're too forceful. So it's like we're taking these tiny little steps so gradually getting in the right direction. And of course, one of the problems we're also facing is the fact that, as mentioned, paganism isn't a one size fits all. So for instance, there was something about the NHS recently doing their pagan kind of advice for if if you're a doctor and you have a pagan under your care, like can they accept medical care, and do they have any things like that. We noticed recently that it was just Wiccan practices. It was the Wheel of the Year and like, oh no, pagans don't want prayers at their bedside. It was very much a very restrictive. Oh, it was so that's one of the things on our to-do list.
Terribly uninformed / outdated.
Yes. Yes. And I kind of see I can kind of see where they're coming from, but at the same time there are so many people saying, hi, we can help you, that there really isn't much of an excuse to have these boxes that are misinformed about various things. So it is an uphill process that is probably going to take many more years to come. But I say there's less of a need for sort of hegemony in terms of what your main book as such, as they're trying to understand that it's different, and the nuances are gradually coming across, but it's slow, and I'm not even dealing with it primarily. I'm listening to those that are, and it feels rather torturous in terms of the little steps they're having to take, and there's the bureaucracy and all of that, just trying to get it to work with their way of doing things rather than going against the grain. But yeah, it's
I feel that having done a brief stint where I was a public priest and trying to get the county to properly take care of our prisoners was like pulling fucking teeth.
Hmm.
And it was made so much worse because we had people who would actively seek out pagan prisoners to minister to them when they didn't want to be ministered to, and the wardens would allow it.
Oh dear.
So I'm not saying be happy with what you've got. I'm just saying that given the hostility, and I live in a fairly liberal area in Michigan, given my reception, the only people who were on my side at that meeting were a Catholic priest, a Buddhist, and agnostic, I think, from the Universalist Church, which was good company to be in. But they were the only denominations there who leapt to my defense. The rest of the Protestants in the room were like, no, we're just going to straight up minister to these people. We take this as an opportunity to evangelize. And I'm like, that's literally not what you signed up for. What are you doing? And the poor, I felt kind of bad for the county commissioner who had organized this fucking mess, because the look on his face when everybody turned to and said, we're going to minister to your prisoners anyway. And I looked at him like, fucking help me, dude. And he looked about as lost as I did. So I'm not saying be happy with your lot, because God knows there's always room for improvement. What I'm hearing, though, is that unlike where I had active, ongoing hostility from just walking in the room looking the way I do, these folks are having to navigate a lot more subtle layers of sometimes just straight up misunderstanding as opposed to violent oppression.
I would say that's incredibly true. It's stuff we also see in the advocacy side, where it's not hostility, it is just, oh, we honestly didn't know. Like we have no idea, you know. So I guess that's a good thing. It's a very good thing in terms of, for the most part, I'm seeing people willing to learn. So thumbs up for that.
That's fantastic.
Little steps.
I mean, I don't know if your experiences or the experiences you're hearing about would necessarily conform with this Sif, but sort of in my experiences, I think overall culturally here, there is still that very Christian element, but unlike in the a fair amount of a fair percentage of people's experiences over in the US, it's less aggressive and hostile and in your face. People aren't necessarily trying to convert you. It's more of an assumption.
Yeah.
So people either don't know or they're not shifting, rather than they're coming up to you and trying to push you in their way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. It's I guess there's that kind of like the appealing to the stereotype of like British politeness, I guess. It's a case of, you know, they won't say it to your face.
Yeah.
But there'll be like the kind of the undercurrents of, oh, do you have to, you know, and there's probably a lot of background noise in terms of just pushback that we're just not even seeing. But I guess, is that better than outright hostility? Yes, I guess. But it's again, it's like I keep saying, it's like Game of Thrones. Obviously the stakes aren't as high, you know, we're not kind of like fighting for the throne or anything, but you know, it's a lot of
I mean, if you hear the rains of Casper, get the fuck out.
yeah, the doors close. Oh no. Well, that's why they invited all of us here. Yeah. I mean, the kind of elements of that. It's yeah, I mean, we'll see where we go. I mean, what I'm feeling in the last year has been more movement than we've had in a very long time. Like I think Sarah, the president of the Pagan Federation, was invited to a Lord Mayor's dinner where all of the Lord Mayor of London's dinner, where all the kind of reverends and the Archbishop of Canterbury were there, and she was there as the pagan, you know, representative, which again had never happened before. So yeah, I think it's again, we're gradually getting to the stage of being considered a serious religion, and all of that means we're being seen as legitimate in the eyes of authority, which is a long time coming. And we'll see where it goes from here. the government's in constant shift at the moment, so it's just, who
Yeah.
knows.
How is the Pagan Federation handling the umbrella nature of it and figuring out who's in the umbrella and who's out of the umbrella? Is there any complication with groups that are like, we don't know if we're pagan, but we're definitely not these other guys, and we're doing this solo is going to be way more expensive?
Oh, that is a headache that has happened. That keeps popping up. I guess the first and foremost is that you have pagan groups that automatically kick back at any sense of togetherness. They don't like having any sort of the idea of having a president of the Pagan Federation and having this committee overruling them is something that is very unsavory to a lot of people. So you automatically have that camp. In terms of the umbrella, obviously, to kind of be kind of tar it all with the brush, as it were. Wiccan is probably British Wicca has been a very dominant force on the pagan landscape in the UK. So it's a case of just everyone else just kind of finding their representatives or their organizations and trying to fit in around that. I would say in the past, the Wiccan elements have been the result of why we had the NHS guidelines being as they are. And just, I mean, there's also the other elements have grown massively over the last 30 years to the point where I'm in there as the only heathen, but on the committee. But yeah, I think what we're seeing now is the recent census, for instance. The Pagan Federation was pushing for people to put pagan rather than whatever other title they're identifying with, to have that larger, like, have that solid number of people go, bam, this is how many pagans there are in the UK. Didn't work out great because obviously, again, the aforementioned don't want to do what other people are telling them to do. There was still, but it worked a large part of that. And it is that kind of like attrition between needing that group to represent you as a pagan, whilst also having people that don't want that group to represent them as a pagan because they're not as nuanced as their practice, or it's a thing.
I get you. One of the biggest issues we have with collecting any firm data here in the US, and this is true whether you're talking about independent or Pew Research Trust research, is you get these people lumped under nuns or spiritual but not religious or other. And it's like, okay, and what the fuck is this supposed to tell us? When people say, well, this is how many people we estimate are pagan in this country, the problem is that the data is biased on the one hand towards sometimes at one point it was biased toward landlines. Now it's biased to whoever picks up the phone. And then you have the additional issue of, is the survey actually looking to divvy up this demographic in a way that's able to be used in any way, sense, or form? Or are you just like, hey, what are you part of the big six or the big five? Or are we just looking at the big three?
Yeah.
And so like getting any kind of like hardline data here is nigh impossible with any degree of accuracy. Because I think last survey was 10 million pagans or some shit here in the US, and I'm like, no, that is incredibly skewed. Especially when on a continuous basis the same institute is telling us that one of the biggest growth religions in the US is paganism generally. So like your own numbers really speak to this being a bigger deal than what you're actually giving credit to. And that's the limit of surveys, yeah, but also just the general trend. So I get it.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, especially when you're trying to get an accurate head count. And some of your programs are really reliant on, hey, we actually have a need here. Especially when you're talking about like prison systems where depending on the prison you're looking at, sometimes the margin for what they're allowed in is razor thin. And the more people that you can reliably point to and go, hey, we actually need this person, or we need a reverend or a pastor to minister to these people.
Mhm.
Sometimes, unless you have those numbers, you don't get service because it's not worth it to the system to provide it.
Mhm.
I don't know if you folks have a similar issue, but that's something
Yeah.
on this side of the pond we have to contend with on a fairly decent basis.
Yeah, it's getting it across that you're not diverting funds or resources to this minuscule population, but something that's growing and definitely needs that support. It's 100% something we're encountering as well, just in terms of, we're not this like outlying kind of population of just scattered here and there across the UK. We have so many people now that are identifying as pagan, that it's becoming like just outstanding. But also, do we have that support network in place to help those people should they want it? And it's trying to balance that idea of just balancing that support, that is difficult. The census was good, but again, it was, you had pagan and then you had other, which included heathen and spiritualist and all of that, which gave us better numbers. But it's still, again, you have the people that are like closeted pagans that couldn't say anything on the census, and so many other variables playing into that. It's a good, again, it's a good benchmark, but not something we're kind of like saying this is the truth.
And I think both countries as well are also dealing with the fact that people will put sort of nominally Christian on censuses and things.
Mm-hmm.
So over here, you'll get people putting Anglican just because they think it looks good, whether it's the reality of it or not. And I would imagine in the States as well, you'll get people writing Christian, whether that's the reality or not. Yeah. Yeah, just as you were talking there, I don't know if it helps listeners to know that Sif and I live in roughly the same area and are a similar age. But I know sort of the last 10, 20 years, every summer solstice, the BBC News will broadcast the Druids doing their ritual at Stonehenge. And like we've seen more and more New Age shops popping up, and people know what Wicca is. I mean, we've sort of addressed the fact that sort of the Wiccan presence on things has skewed everyone's idea of paganism now. So everyone thinks pagan means, the Earth Mother and we have a god and a goddess and that kind of thing. But it has grown in terms of awareness. So it's really interesting seeing that. But I still think a struggle that we're dealing with is sort of getting taken seriously there, rather than being the weird, quirky ones who pop up every summer solstice or every Halloween, or
Yes.
selling crystals in the corner shop. Yeah.
Yeah, in a softer world over in my millennial queer American bubble, the thing that would be ideal is if they had a little box on the census for like, I don't know, but I do tarot sometimes, because that is half the people I know.
Oh dear,
like,
that's the truth.
part of me wants to start going around with a pamphlet that's just like, if you call yourself pagan, even if you're not, just because you like tarot, it helps the shops that sell the tarot decks get more infrastructure that they need to sell you tarot decks. So just write down pagan and figure it out later. We all lying to the government anyway, right?
Oh dear. Yep, that's basically what we have over here as well. Amazing.
So I was looking for a clever way to talk about valkyries, but I didn't come up with anything. Because it's such a weird juxtaposition, right? Like your position that we've been talking about so far is like what, like the words that I would use to describe what I think you're doing are like meeting anchor, agenda secretary,
Yes.
hubcap representative, right? Spokesperson, right? But it's council member. But it's like, is there a heathen god of paperwork, or a heathen spirit of paperwork? And if so, would it be a Valkyrie? I don't know.
I mean,
I
I
mean,
appreciate it. The segue.
they do kind of process you.
Yeah.
Instead of running up to St. Peter's office and getting in trouble, the heathen afterlife is the Valkyrie just kind of carrying you somewhere.
Oh, that's a visual image that I need to draw ASAP. Yeah, basically. I mean, I can talk about Valkyries until whatever the saying is, go blue in the face. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are um an obsession, interest, fascination, um, all of the above. I don't know what happened. I became heathen and then just sort of just latched
It happens.
myself. Yeah. It's
I,
quite funny though, because I was looking back at like my past stuff, and it seems that Valkyries before being a heathen were just hovering around a bit because I had like Magic the Gathering decks, so all just like Valkyrie based, and like it was just I've just like unraveled like the playmats and just everything like that is just keeps popping up, and I'm like, oh, okay, this was supposed to happen then, I guess.
I feel that.
Oh yeah. I mean, Valkyries, where to even begin?
Well, so how succinctly could you answer the question, what is a Valkyrie?
Oh no. Oh no. Okay.
I also feel that.
The name, I guess. Chooser of the Slain, Vala Culia. And that's basically how in the last 1,000 years, roughly, they've been kind of put in the box of. They are associated with Odin in various ways and Freya. And see, I'm already getting that kind of obsession voice. Yeah, they choose the slain, but then in some aspects that has been misconstrued to just be looming over the battlefield and plucking the dead up that are already dead. You see that a lot. I'm going to blame Wagner for a lot of that, but also just a lot of pop culture and all of that. The way that they actually exhibit that power is through being sent by Odin to battlefields to choose those that are going to die and those that are going to live. So it is a lot more, it has a lot of agency behind it that a lot of people overlook, rather than just being like, oh, that person's dead. They seem pretty, worthy. Let's get him to Odin's Hall. And yeah, so a lot of my work, a lot of the writings that I do, is basically about trying to tackle that misconception of the Valkyrie, and reorientate it back to the kind of the early medieval period. I tend to draw a line around about the 15th century.
You
After
had
that,
me at early medieval. I'm paying full
yeah,
attention
yeah,
now.
it's yeah, I mean, I personally see the Anglo-Saxon, I can never pronounce it because I'm not great with the Old English, but the Valkyr, uh, something like that, as the earlier incarnation of the Nordic Valkyrie. And throughout, the early hundreds of years after the Christian era, you have this image painted of feminine warlike spirits inhabiting the battlefield, and gradually over time, going from something quite feral, something quite monstrous, to something domesticated, sanitized, mortal. So in my view, it's the Valkyries are some of the earliest that underwent like euhemerization, the words. They become euhemerized, and to a point where it was acceptable for the kind of anti-conversion writers, and to basically make them mortal and human and the love interests of the heroic characters. But prior to that, they were amazingly kind of like feral and very badass, and you see elements of that persevere throughout the period. But yeah, they are amazing. I love them to bits. I worship them as a predominant force in my practice. Um, and yeah, they're multifaceted, and I really want. I mean, I'm writing a book, but I want other people to write books about along the same lines because there's not a lot.
Soon, TM.
Yeah, I'm 50,000 words in for getting this done. But yeah,
I am living that right now. I understand.
it's
Everybody but Snow here is writing a book.
Snow. Come on.
Give them time.
I refuse. I refuse. I'm not doing it.
Snow will write 100,000 words of blog post quoting a bunch of Stoics long before we get a
Yes.
single novella.
That's okay. We can just condense that down into a chat book. It'll just take some quick editing. It'll be okay.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I will run into Discord's character limit several thousand times over before you get a book out of me.
Damn, it was worth a shot.
Feel that.
So I was wondering if we could just sneak in one of the audience questions that we had here, as you sort of mentioned this, Sif. So Brandon asked, how would or could one involve the Valkyrie in your practice? And are there any gifts or offerings they seem to prefer or like, if so?
I'll go with the last part of that first. Mead. I know it's really obvious. It's but the most powerful like ritual moments that I've had with them is through mead. It's, chances are you already have it if you're a heathen in some aspects. But yeah, the obviously in Eirik Small, we in 954-ish, after the Christian era, we have the image of the Valkyrie being the mead bringer in Valhall. And again, that is stuff that's echoed throughout after that period, perseveres throughout conversion, post-conversion, despite the fact that that story itself was quite satirical. It was a little bit humorous. You had the bumbling Odin, bit surprised about the new person coming into his hall, but that image just stems from that story. And despite the fact that, because it's a little bit satirical, I'm thinking, oh, this is to blame for all of the kind of mead bringingness that happened afterwards, I still incorporate that aspect into my practice. So it's a lot of like, I serve mead to you now as you serve mead to the chosen warriors. Yeah, they love the mead, anything like that, alcohol or water or anything like that. There is in my practice and in my UPG, there's a lot of like liminal space going through from water and the various imagery alongside that, like Roland Darkfeather, the three Valkyries sitting by the lake, just weaving with flax and and doing stuff with the fate, essentially, that coming through there, and so many other things besides. The magical practices, obviously, also this elements of if things are happening of a magical nature or ritualistic nature, it sometimes involves water or being in bodies of water and stuff like that. So that's obviously a bridging the gap sort of element in ritual practice. So again, water is, get it from anywhere. But yeah, in terms of how you involve them in your practice, basically however you also involve any other deity, I see them personally as goddesses. So there's no however you approach a god or goddess or any being at all, I would say would be very much in line with that. I would say don't be put off, words to that effect, by their sort of feralness that they kind of manifest. They're not a monolith. They are very varied, very different characters and personalities in my experience. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're a bit like the dwarves in The Hobbit, just charging in, eating all your food. But other times, they're very much a calming presence, a kind of a guardian presence, full of wisdom and insight. And if you need your focus, they're great for it. But yeah, I don't see them. I see it's quite common in the literature, either today or the last 100 years, to kind of say that there's some sort of like minor spirit. Not in my view. I know that can be quite controversial depending on various academics. But yeah, they're a potent force that I think are often overlooked, and I guess that's what really drew me to them, they seemed like such a juxtaposition. They were, they're just servants of Odin, but also, Odin sends them to every battle to choose who lives and who dies. And so it was just like, okay, so they're pretty powerful if they're doing that on the battlefield, which was a kind of crucible of fate. Kingdoms can rise and fall through the actions on the battlefield. And I just thought that something seriously not balancing here. There is more to be said, more to read up, and I do blame Wagner for a lot of that. I can see one of the questions was about Wagner. No. Don't like Wagner. What he did. Oh, why you?
I think for my portion, if you don't mind, it's a really fraught relationship when it comes to how we get to the understanding of what a Valkyrie is, because you've got all of this cultural cachet, sometimes in front of, sometimes behind the Vathor or the goddess that you're in front of. And I appreciate that you're not out of hand dismissing the more humane or domestic aspects, but also you're really emphasizing they have a monstrous nature. They're badasses of the battlefield. Because for my part, and I understand them as being both the Frank Frazetta badass warrior, but also this inhuman, monstrous force of slaughter. I think that they have the capacity to be both and more, and I generally lean towards the and more, because if we humans contain multitudes, so too are gods, so too Vathir. And I think that part of the drilling down on one particular image, and I jokingly used Frank Frazetta, but honestly, that charges the imagination for some folks about what potential a Valkyrie has. But I appreciate that you're like, bring it back. These contain multitudes. These are beings of water and slaughter and fate and emissaries, but also goddesses in their own right. So what are some with this kind of expanded understanding, what are some of the misconceptions you've had to tease out of how the Valkyries behave or appear or what have you?
Oh, so many.
I understand.
Wagner, thanks, is the root of not a lot of the misconception. Well, no, he is
I was going to say.
Most, in fact. The idea of them being the daughters of Odin stem from him. The idea of them being virgins stem from him. The idea of them losing their virginity means that they lose their powers, or vice versa.
Fucking gross.
Yep. There's so much. I've seen, I don't recommend going on Facebook pagan groups, but I've seen declarations of, oh, the Valkyries are just goddesses of promiscuity. No. That's Wagner.
Wait, Wagner is a goddess of promiscuity?
Yes.
Okay.
You heard it here first. Wagner's work is good if you see it in isolation, but the fact that, for instance, Thomas Bullfinch's mythology,
oh god,
he describes them as warlike virgins, and he also started the whole thing off with the Northern Lights being the Valkyries armor reflecting the light, which is on Travel Norway's website.
That sounds like a total ass pull on his part.
It is. I can't find it anywhere prior to Bullfinch.
Okay, listen, the rest of that sounded terrible, but that actually, maybe we can just call that like an
Yeah.
evolution of the mythology and leave that part in, because that
Yeah.
sounds great.
I mean, I'm for that. It's, we need more like Valkyries being woven into the fabric of things that is removed from their virginity or lack of it. It's no, because that's from again, I'm going to butcher this because Nibelungen the Nibelungen Lied. Don't know. I can see.
Nibelungen lead.
There we go. Got it. Which he combined with Volsunga Saga to create his work. And he basically just cherry picked a load of names and locations and various things. But yeah, he created this character of Brunhilde, the Valkyrie who loses her immortality and power by defying Odin. And that isn't reflected anywhere in anything prior to that.
Yeah, Big Daddy spear chucker with the moral story here.
Yeah, and it just gets even more problematic when you have people believe that, and also that Odin sleeps with the Valkyries, and just a load of misinformation and problematic awfulness just all colliding. Yeah, there's none of that. But again, that is something you'll see just repeated over and over and over again in like heathen books, in academic books, in Norse mythology books. Yeah, just they remain immortal and powerful as long as they remain virtuous. And the I was doing some research on it in terms of, because I was thinking like shield maiden and then using the classicized name like word for maiden, and maybe that was feeding in to the idea of they're virgins. But then again, shield maiden isn't synonymous with Valkyrie, so then you also have that crossover.
Right.
And but we also have like just the Valmaya, the slaughter maidens for Valkyries, and that word choice. But from all of my research, the only thing I can gather from that was a classicization effort to this kind of, and also mistranslation. But yeah, Saxo also does that. He does it when he's describing Lagertha as despite her womanhood, but in the words it's virgin or something. So it's but yeah, it's a convoluted mess basically. And there are so many misconceptions that I'm just trying to just say no, don't. The problem is it's because there's so much of that recorded literature and recent literature and modern perception and pop culture, it feels a bit like fighting against the tide at times. Because they'll just point to, oh, but this book says, and that book says, and this book says. And I'm just like,
it's a worthy fight. I get you. It is a worthy fight, though. I am starting to see the opposite problem, which happens sometimes. And I don't know if it's like a delayed time thing or what. You'll get these gods who are either promiscuous, who are turned into prostitutes, or who are turned into this paragon of virtue because of maidenhood or what have you. And then you will see the opposite, where, and I'm starting to see this with certain goddesses and spirits over this away, where, okay, we've had the great goddess mythology we had that band-aid ripped off, great, good. We had the band-aid of this goddess is only about, maidenhood and this, that, and the other. Now we're having the opposite problem where they are turning these into the dark and spooky gods that only the really cool kids worship.
Yes.
I don't know if you're encountering that yet.
Not that we aren't really cool.
I mean, absolutely. But it's getting to this point of like, on the one hand, virginal maiden, on the other hand, big titty goth girlfriend.
Yeah. 100%. I am seeing that a little bit. Yeah, it's that dichotomy of just the one they can't be in the middle or nuanced or kind of like multifaceted. They put them in boxes. 100%.
So how do you feel about how Valkyries are appearing in things like Marvel Comics then? Is that similar to how you view it in Wagner, or?
I guess I don't have so much of a hatred. Obviously, I'm a Captain Marvel fan. I like Marvel. I'm weirdly I am drinking out of a Thor Love and Thunder thing at the moment.
Nice.
But I guess it's because it's not having so much. People can distance themselves from that as a piece of media, and not assume it was representative of the early medieval beliefs. So I'm not too much against it, and in fact, I quite like, for instance, Marvel's Valkyrie. I think she's very cool. Actually, one of my favorite depictions of the Valkyries comes from the God of War series, which I know that some people have some strong opinions on that, but I have strong opinions in terms of the Valkyries actually were done justice in that piece of media. They had that like balance of being brutal and feral in the first game, but then also, this kind of like quite calming, wise presence in the second. Again, I also quite liked the Valkyrie depiction in the Norseman. Thought that was really cool. As long as they're not kind of feeding into Wagner's image, I tend to be pretty chill with it.
That's legit.
Just, can we not have, I've gone on a tangent already. It's Wagner.
So we've established that Wagner has fucked this up for everybody.
Oh yeah.
What does genuinely sitting down with a Valkyrie in a ritual feel like for you? Like, because you've talked at length about the problem with the aesthetics.
Yeah.
What's the experience like?
Oh boy, it's although the first goddess I worshipped as a heathen, I kind of went in quite, it was with Freya, and she her presence was really was the initiatory kind of ritual of like first being a new heathen. Really went, oh crap, okay, the atheist like dressings just stripped off immediately, and I was like, okay, this is something that I can't logic away. This is a presence that is beyond me and so overwhelming in terms of just I guess love was what I was feeling, but also that hard edge that's like knows what she wants. But the Valkyries were very similar, but they were the first time I ever had an experience with them that I could quantify. It was so overwhelming that I felt like I was having an anxiety attack. So I had to ground myself in terms of like just breathing exercises. And I realized, okay, I'm gonna have to do this because I did kind of go a bit headstrong, this term. And it was met in kind. So my first one was, okay, I do need to be a little bit more careful in terms of where I am in my headspace and meeting them. I would say that every other instance besides that, because it felt like a war drum in my chest, every other one besides that was a little bit more balanced. It was that I feel like were quite reflecting how I'm feeling in that moment. So when I want to do like a high energy ritual, they're there, and they're like, again, that kind of war drum feeling in my chest, just absolute reverberations going through my body. They're empowering, they're there. But in the quieter moments, there's almost like it's like water flowing over me. It's being there in this almost floating aspect. And like I don't want to say like a nexus, but something there is in with their kind of fate manipulating aspects. And just again, they were incorporated into the image of the Swan Maiden, and that's kind of what those aspects feel like to me. Just, we can empower you when you need it. We are brutal when we feel like it. We don't give any crap. But if you need that guiding hand, if you need that just like you're doing the right thing, and also they're quite hard edged, a bit like Freya, then they're there. Getting a bit emotional about it now, but it's They've been a positive influence on my life in terms of, as I touched on, I have generalized anxiety disorder, and they've helped me through that to the point where I've now, like, I do public speaking and all of that. And yeah, I do feel like they have been an empowering force in my life, and just fantastic, to the point where, I feel like my book and all of that is a devotion act. I want to, get a full story put into words, and every hour that I spend researching, my heart and soul and everything else goes into it, and that's a very fundamental piece of me now, I'd say.
Could you talk a little bit more about devotional art and your process, your relationship to it? Is it lightning flashes that you're trying to get in a bottle, or is it more like a steady stream of connection? Like, what's your experience with that?
A steady stream. Funny story. The reason why my birth name isn't Sif. My parents would have been really cool if they did call me that, but I changed my name legally to Sif after doing a devotional piece to Sif. She wasn't on my radar. This is like Freya, the Valkyries, bam, bam, bam. But it was a moment that I was really feeling quite anxious while I was drawing her. And I can't explain it to this day in any capacity, but I found myself in a field of just reeds, like grass, just golden. And I was looking at my drawing of Sif, specifically into the eyes, and I felt something that I can't even begin to describe. It was beyond anything I've ever experienced. Not even, yeah, it was another affirming moment that something is definitely was there. Someone was there, to the point where it made me change my name. But it was a case of, I had been going by Sif prior to being a heathen. I was doing it in online spaces because I was going like by the Lady Sif. And to the point where a lot of my online friends were calling me Sif. That's what they knew me as. And that moment there, for whatever reason, was answering a question that I didn't know I was asking. To the point where, Sif was my name. And I still have got a statue to Sif here. Podcast, you can't see it, but I don't know, you can see that. And she's just there, kind of like over my shoulder, making sure that I'm doing the right thing. But yeah, the actually Sif is a goddess that I also feel has been put into a box unnecessarily. She's, obviously everyone associates with like agriculture and harvest and all that stuff. But I do feel and it is reinforced. There is something, in my belief, there's something Jotun about her. And there is a little bit of research and things in there in terms of kennings and associations with wolf riding, and obviously the connections with like the trolls and Jotnar and all of that, that feed into that. That I think has just been lost. And obviously we have very few stories that have Sif in them at all. And yeah, the to go back to your initial question, it is finding that flow state of all the pieces that I've ever done that are devotional. I try and have that relaxed approach where I'm just thinking about the god, a bit meditative. I'm trying to pour whatever I can in terms of brush strokes and like color choice and like composition and all of that, and just trying to feed it in to whatever I'm drawing. And again, that goes for all the pieces that I do, for gods that I directly worship and others that are just on the periphery. That's how I approach things.
Thank you. we have if no one objects, there's a community question from Kunian. Any further thoughts on the Valkyrie, Nornir, Disir, Fylgjar? Sorry, I mispronounced that. Stew of female spirit roles.
Oh, there's a big stew. It's in my opinion, what I see it as, but that these were quite distinct beings that became a bit of a mesh in the later period. Their differences and demarcations became blurred, to the point, obviously, that is reinforced in like the prose Edda, with Snorri saying like, here's the names of some Valkyries, Skuld, the the youngest Norn, and saying that these are the Norns that shape necessity. And there's obviously a lot of a crossover between Norn and Valkyrie, in terms of whether those two categories are like fate manipulators. They deal with fate, and that's a kind of like tarring the brush in the simplest way possible. But the Disir, obviously ancestral, at times ancestral, other times they are just Valkyries with another name, especially in the later period, the 14th century. You've got basically Disir being described as wearing armor, riding on horseback, coming from the north and south, and basically exhibiting all of these behaviors that would associate with Valkyries, but they're being explicitly called Dis. And obviously we have instances of translators just substituting the name Dis for Nornir, as well. And again, there's that flexibility there. I quite enjoy Stephen Pollington's take, which is that the Disir were seen as ritualistic priestesses, either ancestral spirits or otherwise. And that's where I tie in I reconciled the image of the Valkyrie with the Disir there, because in my perspective is that the Valkyries exhibit ritualistic behaviors on the battlefield. The idea of spilling blood, and like the image of the Gothi like reddening the ring, and a lot of like religious legal crossover. There's no separation of church and state there, and all of that, and the idea of like the Valkyries always just, well, not always, but a lot of the time described drenched in blood, or in Sturlunga Saga we had two Valkyries sitting in a large house, it's called, and it's just dripping with blood. And it's the language that they're saying there. It's like rocking and rocking, said Gunnar and Gondul, their blood rains down before men are slaughtered. We must go to, reap the stuff, the men and the spirits. There is a lot of crossover between Valkyrie, Nornir, Disir, and Fylgjar, especially the feminine Fylgjar, the when they're manifesting in the feminine appearance. In fact, in Vigga Glum Saga, we have Hammingja woman, which is another thing on this list, tagging onto the stew. They had the mountainous Hammingja woman, who is called the goddess of the sword and spear, which is, in my opinion, clearly describing a Valkyrie, but there she's being described as a part of the pluralistic soul, and that's obviously the protective look aspect. There's a lot of mixed. Again, they didn't really have a central glossary of terms. That didn't exist. It was just just the words that they were familiar with, but maybe, obviously there was a lot of variation over time and geography, so things get mixed up and muddled. I do say, though, that with the splintering of the Valkyrie to the other elements, such as a Norn, Disir, that reinforced their mortal human thread. So, they became less and less supernatural as time went on, and more just mortal, heroic, daughters of kings. So there is that sort of splintering and then reinforcement, to the point where you then had Valkyrie in her earlier incarnation being described as a Disir, one of the Dis. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but it's it's like one of those most things that seems to like happen within the Eddas and the sagas and the Nordic literature is just there are exceptions to the rule. It was messy. They got their terms confused, or even those terms were true to what their experience or oral tradition was. And it's quite difficult now in hindsight to do that demarcation, because it wasn't definite across any specific time. You know, it's muddy.
All right. We had one more question from the same community member. With one of your Norn quotes, it says something to the effect of the most part succumbed during birth, end quote. And my ears perked up and wondered whether this was a role for those who died during childbirth, which might be a rational cognate for the Ein Hurjar role.
I mean, I can see it. It's not something I've given too much thought about, because you're getting into that point then of, were the Valkyries ever conceived of as being truly mortal within the religious practice? It's a question that's pretty open-ended. I would say no, and that they were seen as distinct from humans, but made mortal over that course of the anti and post-conversion period, with the Shield Maiden archetype feeding into that image as well. I'd say it's a very interesting idea, and actually I want to do some more work on that in terms of whether it was a role. So they're saying that the women that died in childbirth potentially moved to Valhalla. Yeah, I mean, I would say I would need to do some more research on that.
So we mentioned that recently the Wyrd Less Woven came out.
Yeah.
I haven't got a copy yet, but it looks amazing, and your artwork is, as always, incredible.
I got a copy.
And I
Again,
know
podcast format is not going to be great for this. Sif reveals a cover of
yeah. And a good few people I've seen around have been sort of raving about it, people getting really excited about it, which has been really nice to see. So what prompted the book?
In kind of actuality, it was down saying, hey, I want to work with you. In the grander scheme of things, it was a case of, hi, there's not really a lot of prayer books. I mean, there's no prayer books that include the Valkyries as far as I'm aware, and I've read, I think, all of them. There's a lot of prayer books that just blanket ignore loads of deities that modern heathens worship. Hi, can we accommodate those deities within a prayer book? It was also a drive to be inclusive and very openly pro LGBTQIA+. There is no just a kind of wibbly wobbly central kind of perspective here. It is just like, hi, this is what this book is about. If you don't like it, go away. Which means, yeah, Loki's on the cover. He was really the kind of inspiring force behind it. As a whole, you've got deities in there that are probably going to be very controversial, Surt being one of them. The Valkyries are in there, obviously. I wasn't going to leave them out at any point. But yeah, a lot of the Jotnar are in there. And yeah, there's loads. I think it's like 40, 50 prayers are in there or something like that. Twicefelg, so on and so forth. But yeah, it was a drive to, hi, here's a prayer book that accommodates deities that you probably haven't seen accommodated anywhere else. And here are the aspects of other deities, like Odin. We did a prayer for Odin in there that was really about his gender crossing behaviors, and the way that he manifests and all of that. We've got a prayer in there to Freya and her protective, one, her warrior aspects, which I don't see very often, and two, the influence she has on like queer relationships and protecting the matters of the head and the heart, and so arrow, ace, all included, and and protecting love in every way it can manifest. And that was really what we were drawing towards. Just, this isn't a book that is available now. We probably won't see it for a little while if we don't do it. And for me, it was a massive learning experience just in terms of the kind of the skaldic tradition, which was, I knew it was complicated, and we don't fully embrace all of the rules all of the time in the prayers. We try and stick to them pretty hard through some aspects, at least.
So listen, Not to stick my little folk Catholic fingers in your heathenry, but I have noticed that you happen to have a collection of beautifully, wonderfully drawn sacred art and a collection of prayers. Have you considered prayer cards?
I mean, now we have. That is a good idea, actually.
Please do. There's a definite need for it.
Yeah.
I could say from the working with people in prison / mental health, there are needs for it.
I'm gonna write that down. There we go. Maybe prayer books. I will forget otherwise.
But that book sounds amazing. I'm really excited for when I do get my hands on a copy, and I'm sure we'll definitely put the link for it in the show notes and the episode description so people can go check it out. And judging by comments littered throughout this conversation so far and the teaser in your Instagram bio, I gather the next book is on the Valkyries.
Yes, it is.
Because very ominously in your Instagram, it says Valkyria, servant or master, coming soon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it has a publisher attached. They've given me a deadline, so it's coming at some point. They've given me August, so I'm gonna try and aim for July. It's basically there, but I'm in that really terrible stage now of double checking every single reference and every footnote matches the reference, and that all of it is in the same format style, and the kennings are all through the right stanzas, and it's a whole thing at the moment. I'm also double checking. I'm contacting all of the references I've used, their publishers, to make sure I can quote them. Yeah, Neil Price gave me the thumbs up, so that was good. Side note, I do love his
Awesome.
description of the Valkyries. It's so awesome, isn't it? He calls them the female demons of carnage, and that's how I see them. They're really cool. But yeah, he's great. The Viking Way is a really good book that I've referenced.
So amazing.
Yeah, it's so good. He's also one of the few that's actually sat down and listed the Valkyries and where they appear and the meanings of their names, potential meanings of their names. So, I mean, from whenever that was that 2008 ish? 2000, I think there was a.
I think he re-released it in 12.
Yeah, that rings a bell. That's I mean it. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's been an anchor to my practice, just in terms of giving me that foundation to work with. Like, oh, here's all the names of the Valkyries and here's where they all appear. And I'm like, cool, thank you. I'm gonna read all those now. Yeah. So yeah, the book is coming soon, hopefully published before the end of the year, if not early next. And in that it's the subtitles and exploration of the Valkyries throughout the early medieval period, and it covers early Anglo-Saxon sources through to the 14th century. And I dunk on Wagner for a bit, so it's probably a good read for that alone.
So 2002 was when it was first released for the first edition, and 2019 when it was
Oh damn!
Wow, looks like it was reissued.
Try
in
again.
Keep going. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a good book. If you haven't read it, recommend.
Oh my gosh! Like, honestly, whether you're using it as a reference or you're just reading it for bits and bobs, it is a treasure trove. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Oh my god,
so good. So good.
And it provides the thing that I like about it. If you don't mind me geeking out for just a hot second.
Go ahead.
I love that it provides the words for things that it increased my lexicon for describing magic alone. It gave so many words, and then some of them have similar enough meaning, like Leoth and Kvethi, which are like incantation or chant. And okay,
yeah, it's so
like,
good. And
go ahead,
no, we'll both start nerding out on the Viking Way. Yeah. Like the Gandia spirit as well, and
yes,
yep, and which ties into the Valkyries with Gondul being either the staff bearer or something to do with werewolves. If we're doing the 13th century curse, I hurl the spirits of Gondul at you. Anyway,
yeah, and yeah.
so good.
It really is. And the thing that I appreciate about it is something that you acknowledged earlier in the show was that we have different understandings of these spirits, not only because our lexicon has kind of boiled down over time, but also because the sources we're looking at were written down at different periods. They were referencing different practices. They were looking at different time periods themselves. I think one of the earliest poems is, I believe the earliest completed poem was probably the Volsunga saga, if I remember right, and the other stuff was compiled later. So, like, some of the most raw material we've got is in the Volsunga saga, including stuff like the Sigurd's Rifumal, which stars Valkyrie at some point. And it's like you have all these different references and all these different influences teasing out like what a Valkyrie is from that is an adventure. And I appreciate that you're willing to share that with us, both here on this show and also through your book.
Oh, yeah. I guess it's a benefit to me because I get to talk about them, and so and I could talk about them for days and days and days on end, and no doubt bore everyone that's listening to me. But yeah, I'll never get tired about talking about the Valkyries, and people know that in my circle. They're getting very it's a predictability now. It's like, oh, Sif's doing a talk. Is it on the Valkyries? Yes.
Yeah, whenever I look at AUK events and they put the schedule up, you see Sif and be like, "Oh, that's what's the Valkyrie topic this time?"
Yep.
Yeah, it's really cool though. So we have been going for over an hour and a half. Are people feeling like that's a show?
Yes. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Stop me.
All right, let's all plug your pluggables, beginning with our most esteemed and respected guest, Sif. Where can
Hello.
people find you?
I am on Instagram as Lady Valsif. Valsif being also the name of my YouTube channel, which I've abandoned, but will be going back to at some point soon. I do have a video planned in the next week. And if you want to check out my book, it is The Wyrd Less Woven, an Alternative Heathen Prayer Book. It's available on Amazon worldwide, I believe. Thank you.
No,
So-
since Sif was your invite, plug your pluggables.
Well, I was going to say just before I do, I want to thank you for being here, Sif, sharing everything you've shared. The fact that you have talked about how this has actually impacted your life, I think is really going to go a long way. Because a lot of people often ask with sort of alternative religions like this, sort of what's it doing for you? And the fact that you were brave enough to share your anxieties, and now that this has got you Twitch streaming, writing books, public speaking, doing all these great events, and your involvement with Pagan Federation and AUK. I want to thank you for sharing that, and thank you for all the work that you do, and it's really cool. And thank you for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, you can find me Linktree/SnowTheGoth. Everything's there. Easy enough. Cabra.
My turn to plug? Oh, I remain at steelcitywitch.com and also on YouTube as Steel City Witch.
And you can find our friend Emily Streaking Fate on streakingfate.wordpress.com. And you can find us at patreon.com/aroundgrandfatherfire if you wish to sign up for our Patreon, but being part of our Discord does not require you to sign up for our Patreon. If you can support us on Apple Music or anywhere you get your podcasts, please leave us good reviews, help boost us in the algorithm, that kind of thing. You can find my personal work on sarenth.wordpress.com if you wish to sign up on my Patreon, where I do devotional poetry and topics. You can sign up on patreon.com/Sarenth Odinson. And you can find me pretty much on all social media, Sarenth Odinson or at Sarenth. I'm on Twitter, the Mastodon as Sarenth. So you can find me there or on TikTok as well. Although I've been mostly just reposting lately. So this has been fabulous. I would love to have you back on, especially when this next book drops. That'd be awesome.
Oh, yes, I'll be there.
Please keep us in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time around the fire.